This is Martin Luther. He was born on November 10th, 1483, in Eisleben, Germany. Luther grew up in a Catholic household, the Hans and Margareta Luther. Martin Luther would go on to be a Catholic monk. He ended up having a change in views and became a reformer of the Roman Catholic Church. He felt that this was important to do because of the corruption in the church. The main corruption that he hated the most was papal indulgences. Luther hated these indulgences because they were lying, saying if you buy a papal indulgence, you will be wiped completely of your sins up to that point. As a result of this, Martin Luther wrote the infamous 95 Theses, where he summed up all of his issues with the Roman Catholic Church. He stated things such as, "Thus those indulgences preachers are in error who say that a man is absolved from every penalty and saved by a papal indulgences." The Catholic Church actually acted on these theses and excommunicated many priests and bishops that were doing wrong at this time. Luther, however, did not care and felt that all 95 of his theses should have been agreed upon, and instead of dealing with the corruption, he chose to break from the Catholic Church and created his own church called the Lutheran Church. Martin Luther, in his later life, went on to not only hate the Catholics, but he also started to develop a very deep hatred for Jewish people, creating writings such as On the Jews and Their Lies, where he talks about all of his issues he has with Judaism. Martin Luther, the 16th century German theologian and religious reformer, contributed to the spread of anti-Semitic attitudes in Europe. His writings propagated hatefulness to Jewish people, reinforced existing stereotypes, and influenced future generations to have anti-Semitic ideologies. One excerpt from On the Jews and Their Lies is, "Moses writes in Deuteronomy that where a city practices idolatry, it should be entirely destroyed with fire and leave nothing. If he were living today, he would be first to put the fire to the Jews' schools and houses." This quote shows how Martin Luther believed that because the Jewish people didn't believe in what Luther believed in, they should burn down their schools and synagogues because of what Moses said in the book of Deuteronomy. Moses says that if a city practiced idolatry, which means extreme love for someone or something, that they should burn it down and leave no remains. This means that Martin Luther believes that the Jewish people are committing idolatry, which shows his hatred for the Jews, and he wanted their schools to be burned down because of it. Next, from this document, Luther states, first, that we avoid their synagogues and schools and warn people against them. Luther is saying that the Jews should be isolated from the rest of the people because he does not agree with their beliefs. This is an obvious prejudice that he has, and he is spreading anti-Jewish beliefs, and it is causing reformers to turn on the Jews. Finally, from this writing, Luther states, accordingly, we should not joke about this matter, but very sincerely find counsel against it and save our souls from the Jews, that is, from eternal death. Martin Luther is saying in this quote that you should not interact with the Jews, and if you do, it is basically a one-way trip to hell. Luther believes that the Jews are demonic, which back then was a very serious thing that was very frowned upon. This relates to Martin Luther using hate speech to Jewish people and demonizing them, as he is making them seem like a very demonic group of people. All of this combined proves that Martin Luther used words to propagate hatefulness to Jewish people. These excerpts tie into the fact that Martin Luther calls a change in the way people treated Jewish people, as his role in the Protestant Reformation caused more people to turn on Jewish people, especially his evangelical Protestants. In On the Jews and Their Lives, Martin Luther reinforced the stereotype that Jews are out to get Christians and that it's demonic. This is seen in this quote, "They treat us Christians in like manner. When we come to them and they receive us, they pervert the word. God welcome you and say, shed will come. That is, devil come, or there comes a devil. Since we do not understand the Hebrew, they secretly practice their hatred against us. That we think they are friendly to us, while they curse us with the fire of hell and all misfortune." This quote shows Martin Luther reinforcing that Judaism is a demonic religion that is out to get Christians. This quote describes the Jews saying, "Devil, come," as Luther believes that the Jews are demonic. Also, in an interview with Dr. Christopher Ocker, he explains how Jesus was the fulfillment of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament, but Jews don't believe in the fulfillment of the Hebrew Bible through Jesus. This caused Martin Luther to get mad at the Jews and call them stubborn, dim-witted, dishonest, and say that the Jews robbed the Christians. Another quote that reinforces the stereotypes that Jews are money hungry is when Luther states, "Say it should not designate Messiah, but should denote all gold and silver of the heathen, because the word hemdith, according to the grammar, really means desire and love for, as that which the heathen desire and love. And now the text shall read thus, after a little while the desire of all heathen shall come." What is that? What do the heathen desire? Gold, silver, and jewels. You may be inclined to ask why the Jews insert such interpretations here. I will say their breath stinks for the gold and the silver of the heathen. Since no people under the sun always have been, still are, and always will remain more avaricious than the Jews, as can be noticed in their curse for usury. They also find comfort with this. When Messiah comes, he shall take all the gold and silver in the world and distribute it amongst them. This quote shows how Martin Luther is reinforcing the stereotype that Jewish people are money hungry, which is bad for Jews because it can cause them to be untrusted, and this stereotype is still prominent in today's culture where people think all Jews are money hungry. Finally, this quote shows how Martin Luther reinforced the stereotype that Jews try to boast and act better than everyone else. Luther states this, they are boastful, proud fools, who to this day cannot do more than to praise themselves because of their nobility and blood, praise themselves alone and despise and condemn the whole world in their schools, prayers, and teachings. Yet they imagine themselves to be standing before God as his dearest children. This quote shows how Martin Luther is reinforcing the stereotype that Jewish people boast and act better than everyone else. This stereotype is harmful because it can get people to turn on Jewish people, and it can be traced to events like the Holocaust. Martin Luther's writings and teachings influenced the Nazis. We can see this from the article, "Does Martin Luther Bear Some Responsibility for the Holocaust?" where it states, "What we can say safely though is that yes, the father of the Reformation did express starkly anti-Semitic Semitism in print and at great length. In the treatise Your Name, he explicitly advocates the persecution of German Jews, saying at one point, 'We are at fault for not slaying them,' and the Nazis couldn't get enough of it." This quote describes how the Nazis used many of Luther's writings as fuel to the fire, which proves how Martin Luther influenced future generations to have anti-Semitic ideologies. The Nazis used his writings to inspire future decisions such as the Holocaust, which has nearly eradicated the Jewish popularity entirely, as less than 1% of people are now Jewish. Martin Luther's words helped inspire the Nazis, which wanted to kill millions of Jews. This quote shows how the Nazis used many of Luther's works to justify their actions. This means that Martin Luther was a direct influence on the Nazis. This means that Luther's writings are partly responsible for the actions of the Nazis, because the hatred he spewed towards Jewish people was inspiring enough to be justification for the Nazis' actions. This is significant because it proves that Martin Luther had a significant influence on the Nazis, which was probably one of the worst groups of people you could have had an influence on. And Luther had a significant influence on them. Also, in a conversation with Dr. Christopher Acker, he explained how the Nazis actually republished some of the writings that were anti-Semitic to help Lutherans actually side with the Nazis in World War II. Overall, Martin Luther's role in the Protestant Reformation resulted in negativity. Not only did it change Christianity, but it also changed Judaism, as many modern-day stereotypes and ideologies of Jewish people were all displayed by Martin Luther. This is why Martin Luther's role in the Protestant Reformation was such a big deal, as it changed millions of Jewish people's lives for over 400 plus years.